4 years after my ex-husband told me I wasn't built for rooms like his, I stood at the center of one of the largest healthcare investment summits on the East Coast and watched his face go pale when my husband's daughter ran across the ballroom floor and called me mom. He had no idea whose wife I was. He had spent 6 months trying to get this meeting, and the man he'd been chasing all year had just walked in behind her, found me first, and put his hand on the small of my back like I had always belonged here. I didn't know any of that would happen when my marriage ended. All I knew on a Thursday evening in April 4 years ago was that my husband's laptop was open on the kitchen counter, and I had gone to close it before bed, and a chat window was sitting right there in the middle of the screen. Not a text, a message thread. His COO's name at the top, the last line visible before I could look away. Can't stop thinking about last night. I stood very still. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car passed. I read the line again. Then I scrolled up because I was stupid enough to think context might make it mean something different. It didn't. Trevor was at a client dinner. He had been at a lot of those lately. His company, Medvance Solutions, had been growing fast for the past 18 months, faster than either of us had expected. When he first pitched the concept at our kitchen table, 4 years before that, back then, he was 31 and terrified and working out of the second bedroom of our apartment in Raleigh. I was 29, making decent money as a program coordinator at a community health nonprofit, and I believed in him with the specific, stubborn certainty of someone who has never been given a reason not to. I paid our rent for nearly 2 years. I covered our health insurance. When Medvance almost lost its first major hospital client because Trevor couldn't afford to hire a proper compliance team, I spent 4 weekends helping him build the documentation from scratch. I did not do those things to hold them over him. I did them because we were a team. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being a teammate and became an inconvenience. It happened slowly, the way those things always do. Trevor started coming home late, then barely coming home at all. He started correcting the ways I spoke at business dinners, not in private, in front of people. He started referring to my job as the little nonprofit thing with a half smile that invited other people to agree it was small. When I mentioned I'd been asked to present at a statewide health equity conference, he nodded without looking up from his phone. The night I found the messages, I sat down at the counter and read the whole thread, 47 minutes. Then I closed the laptop and went to bed and lay there staring at the ceiling until I heard his key in the door. I didn't confront him that night. I waited until morning. When I showed him what I'd found, Trevor did not apologize. He said, very calmly, that Sandra understood what he was building in a way I never had. That she came from this world, the funding rounds, the board meetings, the conferences where the right handshake could change everything. He said he hadn't meant for it to happen, but that he also hadn't been trying to stop it. Then he said the thing that stayed with me for years. Maddie, you're not built for rooms like this. That's not an insult. It's just true. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I asked him to sleep in the guest room and he did, and I called an attorney the next morning before he woke up. The divorce took 5 months. It was not dramatic in the way people expect. There were no screaming matches, no public scenes. Just paperwork, mediation, 2 people who had once shared a bed, now sharing a spreadsheet of shared assets and dividing up the years. Trevor moved Sandra into the townhouse we'd bought together before the ink was even dry on our separation papers. I found out through his assistant, who texted me by accident. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Durham and spent the first several months trying to convince myself I was fine. I was not fine. I worked. I went to the grocery store. I answered emails. And in the quiet of that apartment, at 11 o'clock at night when there was nothing left to do, I would sit on my couch and run Trevor's words through my head like a math problem with a missing variable. You're not built for rooms like this. What did that mean exactly? Built for what? Which rooms? Which version of me wasn't enough? I didn't know, about 9 months after my divorce was finalized, that I was about to meet a man whose daughter would pour sparkling water on my laptop bag at a hospital foundation gala, and then look me dead in the eye and say she had done it on purpose. I turned around. A girl, maybe 8 years old, was standing with her arms crossed, and the expression of someone who had already decided how this conversation was going to go. She had dark curly hair pulled back unevenly, and a moral certainty in her posture that I recognized from years of working with children. "Why?" I asked. "Because you were walking too close to my dad." I looked around. The nearest man was a gray-haired cardiologist I vaguely recognized from a grant meeting. "Which one is your dad?" She pointed. Across the room, a man in a navy blazer was making his way toward us with the focused expression of someone who had navigated a lot of social disasters involving this particular child. He was tall, late 30s, with the kind of tired around, the eyes look that had nothing to do with the hour. He reached us and crouched to her level first, which I noticed. "Calla, what did we talk about?" "Not to make assumptions." "And?" "Not to act on the assumptions I'm not supposed to be making." "So what happened here?" She pointed at my bag, preemptive action. The man closed his eyes briefly, then he stood and looked at me. "I am so sorry. Can I replace whatever was?" "It's a canvas bag, it'll dry." I held out the cocktail napkins from the table behind me. "But if you did it on purpose, you should help clean it up." She stared at me. Then without comment, she took the napkins. Her father watched this with the careful expression of someone calculating odds. "Kieran Walsh," he said, extending his hand. "Madeleine Park, Maddie." He glanced at his daughter. I'm not entirely sure what her reasoning was. "I thought you were trying to get his attention," Calla said, not looking up from dabbing at my bag. "Women do that. It's annoying." "Calla. It's a pattern I've observed." "You're 8. I'm observant." I almost laughed. It came out anyway, small and surprised. Calla looked up quickly, checking whether I was making fun of her. I wasn't. She went back to the bag. "She's not wrong," I said, in the abstract. Kieran gave me a look that was equal parts exhaustion and something that might have been relief. "You work with the foundation?" "I coordinate the community access programs. We're hoping to pitch the maternal health initiative tonight." "I know that program." Something shifted in his expression. "Walsh Capital funded the pilot at UNC." I looked at him. "Your Walsh Capital?" "Smaller version of it, yes." Calla finished with the napkins and handed me the soggy stack with the solemnity of a child completing a court-ordered task. "I still don't like you," she said. "That's fair. You don't know me." "Exactly." She walked away toward the appetizer table. Kieran watched her go. She usually takes at least 10 minutes before declaring someone an enemy. "I feel special." "You're the 3rd this month. We've been going to a lot of events." I understood, without him explaining it, that there was a specific shape to his life he was working around. I had been working around something of my own for the better part of a year. I recognized the posture. I gave him the foundation's contact card instead of my personal number. He nodded like that was entirely reasonable, and when he called the office 2 weeks later to follow up on the maternal health grant, he didn't mention the gala at all. That mattered. It took me another month to find out, through my colleague Yolanda, who knew every piece of institutional gossip in the Triangle, that Kieran Walsh had lost his wife to a brain aneurysm 3 years earlier. Calla had been 5. She had been home when the paramedics came. I thought about the 8-year-old at the gala, arms crossed, watching every woman who moved near her father like she was cataloging threats. That wasn't entitlement. That was terror with nowhere else to go. The next time I saw Calla, it was because her school called our nonprofit. She was listed as a participant in our after-school wellness program. Her father was stuck in a meeting in Charlotte. Her regular caregiver had a family emergency. I was the next name on the approved contact list. I went. She was sitting in the nurse's office with a cold pack on her forehead, looking furious at the entire situation. When I walked in, her expression didn't soften. "You're not my mom." "I know." "Then why are you here?" "Because your dad couldn't come yet, and I was the next name on the list." She studied me. He didn't put you there. The program did. He doesn't even know you that well. That's true. I pulled a chair closer, but not too close. You don't have to like having me here. Silence then. Stay, I guess. Her father arrived 40 minutes later. Kala was half asleep. By then, her fury temporarily suspended. Kieran came through the door and went straight to her, and the look on his face, when he touched her forehead, was the same look I had once seen on my own father's face in an emergency room. Pure, helpless love. He looked up at me across the cot. He didn't speak for a moment, then, "Thank you." "Of course." "You didn't have to." "She was on the list." He nodded. Something in his expression said he understood. I wasn't doing it for him. Later, driving home, Kala said from the back seat, "She stayed." Kieran glanced in the rear view. "She did. She didn't try to fix anything. She just sat there." "Is that okay?" "Yeah," Kala said. "I think so." We started having coffee. Once a month, then twice. He never pushed. When I said I wasn't ready for something, he said okay and meant it. That word had been so weaponized in my marriage. Okay said with a sigh. Okay that meant you're being difficult. That hearing it said plainly felt like an act of radical kindness. About 6 months in, I told him about Trevor. We were sitting on a bench outside a coffee shop in Chapel Hill, and I gave him the compressed version. My ex-husband had built a company I helped fund and support, had been having an affair with his COO, and left before I could catch my breath. Kieran listened without interrupting. Then he said, "What did he say when you found out?" I looked at my coffee cup. That I wasn't built for rooms like his. He didn't say what an asshole, though his jaw moved in a way that suggested he was thinking it. He said, "Do you believe him?" The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. "Because that's the part that matters," he said quietly. "Not whether he was wrong. He obviously was. But whether you still believe him." I didn't have an answer that day. I thought about it for weeks afterward. 11 months after we first had coffee, Kieran proposed. He did it at home with no audience. Kala was in the other room watching a movie, which I appreciated. This was between us first. I looked at the ring and then at him and said, "Does Kala know you're doing this?" He blinked. "This is between you and me." "Kieran," I closed the ring box gently. "If I say yes, I become part of her home too. I want to do that right." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "That might be the most important thing anyone has ever said to me." The next afternoon, Kala knocked on my apartment door. She was holding a piece of notebook paper folded 3 times with "official Diegment" written across the front in purple marker. "Dad said you wanted to do this right," she said. "I did." She held out the paper. I unfolded it. She had written, in her careful 10-year-old handwriting, "Rules if you marry my dad. 1. Don't move my mom's things. They stay where they are, too. You can help with school stuff, but ask first. 3. Knock before coming into my room. Always. 4. Don't pretend everything is fine when it's not. I can tell. 5. Don't disappear without saying something." I read the last line twice. "I won't disappear," I said. She shifted her weight. "You might. People do." "I know they do." I looked up at her. "Your mom didn't want to." Her face changed. Something cracked in it just for a moment. "I know that. What happened to her doesn't mean the same thing will happen to everyone. You can't promise that." "No," I said. "But I can promise that if I ever have to go somewhere, I'll tell you first." She chewed her lip. "Promise?" "Promise." She looked at the paper, then back at me. "Okay, you can marry him." I laughed, despite myself. "Thank you." "Don't make it weird." We got married the following February. Small, immediate family, a few close friends, a restaurant with a private room and winter light coming through the tall windows. Kala stood beside her father the whole ceremony and watched me with the focused attention of a safety inspector. Afterward, she told me the centerpieces were unnecessary, but the salmon was excellent. I had never been happier in my life. The adjustment was not seamless. There were moments. Kala pushing back hard when I suggested a different dinner routine. me second-guessing every decision I made in her space because I was terrified of getting it wrong. That required real conversation and real honesty. Kieran didn't expect either of us to be perfect. He expected us to show up, and when we didn't, he sat down with us both and talked it through. I had spent years in a marriage where my hurt feelings were a problem to be managed. Being treated like someone whose perspective was worth the conversation took a long time to stop surprising me. 4 months into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. Kala reacted with deep suspicion. A 3-day silence and then a series of increasingly specific questions. Would the baby get her room? Would I still come to her soccer games? Did babies ruin households? She was conducting research. One evening, I found her sitting at the top of the stairs while Kieran was on a work call. "Are you worried about something?" I asked. She picked at the hem of her sleeve. "Will she be more yours than I am?" Everything in me went quiet. "She'll be my biological daughter," I said. "That's one specific thing. So she's real and I'm." "Kala." I sat beside her. "You're not a category. You don't get less mine because another person exists." I nudged her shoulder gently. Families aren't a fixed amount that gets divided. One person arriving doesn't shrink what's already here. She was quiet. That's a weird way to say it. Probably. But okay, she stood. If she cries all night, I'm not babysitting. Noted. Our daughter was born the following October. We named her Violet. Kala stood at the hospital bedside and stared at her for a long moment with an expression of complicated neutrality that dissolved, slowly, into something entirely unguarded. "She's holding me," Kala whispered, when Violet wrapped her whole hand around Kala's finger. She didn't say anything else. She just stood there. After that, Kala complained about the baby constantly, the noise, the smell, the general disruption of having an infant in the house, and was the first person to check on her every single morning. She never called me mom. I had promised her she didn't have to. I meant it. 18 months into our marriage, Walsh Capital announced its annual Healthcare Innovation Summit in Washington, D.C. It was the firm's biggest event of the year. Kieran asked me to speak on a panel about equitable access in rural health markets. My first instinct was to say no. Not because I didn't know the material. I had spent 2 years helping develop the community health portfolio. I knew every number, every program, every gap in rural care infrastructure that we were working to close. But there was still something in me that heard summit and investment conference and felt a door close somewhere in my chest. A reflex left over from years of being told I didn't belong in rooms like that. Kieran was quiet when I hesitated. Then he said, "You've built this portfolio. You know every person in those programs. Why are you talking yourself out of a room you're already in?" I didn't answer. "I'm not asking you because you're my wife," he said. "I'm asking because you're the right person." That was the difference. Every invitation Trevor had ever extended came with conditions I had to meet first, proof I had to provide. Kieran just told me I was already qualified. I said yes. The night of the summit's opening reception, I arrived late. There had been a last-minute issue with one of our rural clinic partners, and I'd taken a call in the hotel lobby that ran long. Kieran was already inside with Kala. She had come for the DC trip and was being remarkably well-behaved in a dark green dress she'd chosen herself, and Violet was with Kieran's sister in the hotel room upstairs. I crossed into the ballroom and heard my name. Maddie. I turned. Trevor was standing 8 feet away, older, sharper, a better suit than he'd owned during our marriage, and a practiced ease in the way he held himself that told me he'd spent years learning to look like he'd always been this person. Beside him was Sandra. Her hand was through his arm. A ring on her left hand caught the chandelier light. "I didn't realize you'd be here," he said, the way you'd say it to someone you'd spotted in the wrong section. "I'm on the panel tomorrow," I said. Sandra's eyebrows moved, just slightly. "Which panel?" "Community Health Equity and Rural Market Access." She smiled. "Oh, that's great." Trevor's eyes moved over me, and then that old expression returned. The one I had spent a long time trying to stop seeing. half amused, half something colder. Didn't know they were pulling from the nonprofit side for something like this. Quite a few people here came from that background, I said. Sure, he shrugged. I just meant, you know how it is. Rooms like this aren't exactly your natural habitat, Maddie. There it was, the same sentence. 4 years later, different city, same tone, same Trevor. You're not built for rooms like this. A year earlier, those words would have tightened something in my chest. Standing there, they landed like a phrase you've heard. So many times it's lost all meaning. You've said that before, I said. He blinked. What? That I don't belong in rooms like this. You said it the night I found out about you and Sandra. You're saying it now. I kept my voice even. I'm curious which room you think I'm suited for. He opened his mouth, closed it. Sandra's smile stayed in place, but her eyes had cooled. Before Trevor could find an answer, I heard footsteps behind me, quick, deliberate, and then a hand slid into mine. Calla. She had Violet on her hip. Kieran's sister had apparently run into a delay in the elevator. Violet was awake, bright-eyed, reaching for anything within range, and Calla was holding her at a careful distance from her own earrings, with the seasoned patience of someone who had been outsmarted by this baby before. Mom, Calla said, Dad says they're starting in 10 minutes and you're supposed to be at the panel check-in. The word fell into the space between all of us like a stone dropped into still water. Trevor went completely still. Sandra turned and looked at Calla for the first time. Violet saw me and reached both arms out immediately, the way she'd done since she was 6 weeks old. I took her. She grabbed the front of my blazer. Hi you, I said. Calla glanced at Trevor and Sandra with the flat, assessing calm of a child who has seen a lot and found most of it unimpressive. Are these your friends? Old acquaintances, I said. She nodded, already losing interest. Then Kieran appeared from across the room, moving toward us with the focused, unhurried walk of a man who has spotted the people he loves and is simply making his way to them. He reached me and kissed my temple, took Violet from my arms before I'd even shifted my grip. There she is, he said quietly to the baby. Then he looked up and seemed to register Trevor and Sandra as if noticing them for the first time. His hand settled at the small of my back. Kieran Walsh, he said, extending his free hand. Trevor shook it. His color had changed. Trevor Holt, Medvance Solutions. We've actually been trying to get some time with your office. I've reached out through procurement a few times. I know. Kieran's voice was perfectly pleasant. You're one of tomorrow's presenting companies. The silence afterward was very small and very complete. Trevor looked at me, then at Kieran, then back at me. I watched the calculation happen behind his eyes. The name, the title, my last name, my face. And I watched the moment it all arrived at once. He started. It's a documented conflict, I said. I recused myself from any review involving Medvance the week I found out they were in the applicant pool. Nothing I've done here touches that process. Trevor stared at me. Sandra's hand tightened slightly on his arm. For the first time all evening, her expression was not entirely certain. We should let you get to check-in, Kieran said. Politely, finally, the way you close a door without making a sound. As we turned to go, Trevor said my name. I paused. Kieran looked at me. I gave him a small nod. He took Calla and Violet toward the registration table. I turned back. Trevor stood alone. Sandra had moved a step away, giving him space or taking it for herself. I couldn't tell. The polish was gone from his face. He just looked tired, not travel tired, the other kind. You didn't tell me, he said. I've been divorced from you for 3.5 years. I don't report to you. His jaw tightened. I've been trying to get this meeting for 6 months. I know. You could have mentioned there was a conflict. I looked at him for a long moment. You told me I wasn't built for rooms like this. You said it the night our marriage ended. You said it again 5 minutes ago. And here I am, standing in a room I've spent 2 years helping build with my husband and my daughters. I kept my voice level. I don't owe you a warning, Trevor. He looked away. I'm not trying to hurt your company, I said. I recused myself. The review runs the same way it would have run if you'd never known my name. Whatever happens, it happens on the merits. I paused. That's what you want, isn't it? A fair process? Yeah, he said quietly. Then you have one. I walked away before he could answer. For the first time in 4 years, walking away from Trevor felt like absolutely nothing. Not victory, not grief, not the old complicated weight I used to carry home in my chest. Just the plain, unremarkable act of ending a conversation that had run its course. I found Kieran near the panel entrance. He handed Violet back to me without asking if I was okay. He looked at my face and seemed to decide the question wasn't necessary. Ready? He said. Yes. The panel went well. I knew the data. I knew the programs. I knew every gap in rural healthcare access that the community portfolio was working to close. And I talked about it the way you talk about work you've done yourself. Not borrowed, not performed, mine. Afterward, a hospital system director asked for a follow-up call. A health equity researcher from Johns Hopkins wanted to discuss a collaboration. A woman who ran a maternal care network in rural Appalachia grabbed my arm and said, "Finally, someone who actually understands the infrastructure problem." Across the room, I caught Trevor watching. Not my dress, not Kieran, me. I didn't try to read what was in his expression. It didn't belong to me anymore. Medvance Solutions did not receive funding. The review team found significant irregularities in their reported user adoption numbers, metrics that had been, according to the compliance report, materially overstated in the pitch materials. Kieran told me only after the decision was final and public within the firm. He had recused himself fully from the Medvance review, along with 2 other partners who knew me personally, and left it to the team. "Are you okay?" he asked that evening. "I expected to feel something bigger," I said. "Like what?" "Satisfaction, I suppose." He waited. "Mostly, I just feel tired." I leaned against his shoulder and relieved it's over. He put his arm around me. Violet was asleep on the monitor. Calla was in her room, almost certainly still awake with a book. "Can I tell you something?" I said. "Always." He said it again, at the reception, that I wasn't built for rooms like his. Kieran was quiet. "Then what did you say?" I asked him which room he thought I belonged in. Did he answer? No. He turned to look at me. "Do you believe him?" The same question. The one he'd first asked me on a bench outside a coffee shop over 2 years ago. The one I hadn't been able to answer. "No," I said. His face softened. "I did for a while," I said. He was so certain about it, and I had been making myself smaller for so long that his certainty started to feel like fact. I looked at my hands. But the thing about rooms is that they don't decide who belongs in them. People do. And I helped build the room he walked into last night. Kieran didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The following spring, Calla came home from school with a family history project, a display board for 6th grade Heritage Night. Her teacher called to gently warn us that the format asked students to include people who had shaped their family. Calla had reportedly told her teacher that family was a more complicated word than people gave it credit for, and she would need extra poster board. She worked on it for a week at the kitchen table. She wouldn't let either of us see it until the night of the event. She unrolled it in the school gymnasium in front of Kieran, me, and Violet, who immediately tried to eat the corner ribbon. There were 4 sections. Her mother, a photo of a young woman with Calla's exact curly hair and a laughing expression. Underneath, in Calla's careful handwriting, she loved being outside and she made terrible puns and she smelled like cedar sea soap. She made everything feel safe. Her father, a photo of Kieran at a charity 5K in an orange headband he claims no memory of. Underneath, he tries very hard and usually gets it right. Also, he's funnier than he thinks. Violet, a photo taken at the hospital the day she was born, in Calla's arms, both of them squinting in the fluorescent light underneath. She is extremely loud and she drooled on my hoodie 3 times, but she is my sister, and I would fight anyone who looked at her wrong. And me. The photo was from a foundation event several months ago. Someone must have taken it. I was mid-sentence, laughing at something off-camera, not looking at the lens at all. Underneath, Kala had written, "She showed up when my dad couldn't get there in time. She didn't try to be my mom. She just waited until I decided she already was." I had to press my lips together very hard. Kala watched me read it with the steady expression of someone who has taken a risk and is watching carefully for the result. "Is it okay?" she said. "It's more than okay." She nodded once, satisfied. Then she turned to argue with Kieran about whether the orange headband photo was absolutely necessary or just personally mortifying. That night, after Violet was asleep, and Kala had been talked into putting the markers away, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea and looked out at the backyard. The string lights we'd hung along the fence were still on, left over from a birthday dinner the week before. 3 years ago, I sat alone in an apartment in Durham and ran a sentence through my head until it stopped making sense. "You're not built for rooms like this." I had believed it for longer than I should have. I had made myself smaller and called it compromise, and been genuinely surprised when there was nothing left of me to find. I was not small. I had never been small. I had just been standing next to someone who needed me to believe I was, because it was easier than acknowledging what I had actually been. Kieran came into the kitchen and refilled my cup without asking. He sat across from me. Outside, the string lights were reflected faintly in the window glass. "You okay?" he said. "Actually, yes." He smiled. "She wrote that I waited until she decided," I said. "You did." "I wasn't sure she ever would." "I know." He reached across the table and found my hand. "I wasn't sure either." I looked at him. "How did you know to just wait?" He thought about it honestly. "I didn't," he said. "I just kept showing up and hoped she'd notice what that meant." I held on to his hand. For a long time, I had believed love was the art of proving yourself, of being useful enough, patient enough, undemanding enough to deserve the space you took up. I had built an evidence file for my own worth and offered it up and still lost. I had measured my value in every rent check I covered, every late night I stayed up, every earring I never replaced, and added it all up and still found myself standing in an apartment, wondering what had gone wrong. Love was not a case you built. It was not a debt someone owed you for showing up during the hard years. Sometimes it was a door held open by a man who accepted no the first time and meant it. And sometimes the person who finally let you in was a child who had written her terms on notebook paper in purple marker and watched you read them without looking away. 4 years ago, Trevor told me I wasn't built for rooms like his. He was right about exactly one thing. I was not built for his rooms. The rooms where you earn your place by staying quiet, where love is a transaction, where the person who helped you survive the lean years disappears once the story gets good enough to tell without them. I was built for this one. The kitchen with the backyard lights still on, the sleeping baby upstairs, the kid in her room, probably reading, who had used a whole week and her best purple marker to say I had always been here. I had been built for it from the beginning. I just hadn't known yet that the right room was still ahead of me,